G'day Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagle, a channel where I exclusively review all of West Coast's big losses. My sister actually said that to me the other day. She said, True Eagle, is that the one where you review all of West Coast's enormous losses? And I said, yeah, shut up. I had no comeback to that. The Eagles go down by 83 points in the end, I think, to the Melbourne Football Club in a result that I entirely predicted. In fact, that didn't go as badly as I thought it might, in the sense that I think there actually were some positives today, which I know that some people push back on. I like to be someone who looks at the nuance in games, and I would contrast it to the Richmond game and the Fremantle game where I didn't really think there were too many positives. At least I don't recall pointing out too many from those games. This one flowed a little bit differently. It felt like we were more than in the hunt for the second half of the second quarter and the first half of the third quarter. We were arguably, maybe not outplaying them because we had no polish once again, but we were certainly matching them and certainly playing the game on our terms, if not putting any real dent on the scoreboard. It's just that the moment after Tom Cole's miss, where I actually posted on Instagram, I said, this should be a closer game than it is. We got absolutely annihilated from that point onward, which, all in all, is not a surprise. I actually think Melbourne are a very equipped side to smash teams, or at least score quickly. Maybe not smash teams. I'm not saying that they're a good side, but I would contrast it to, say, someone like a Port Adelaide who is higher than them on the ladder. I think they have a little bit more weaponry in that team. So I'm not really surprised at all when you look at the quality of some of their players on that team. Hence why I expected this to be a big loss today. It added to the fact, it's been a long, painful season for West Coast. And, we already have the worst rucks in the competition against Max Gorn. We already have the worst midfield in the competition. And that's, before you even take out Yo and Reid, who, of course, are unavailable. I just thought this would be the game our heads drops. And I don't think our heads did drop in this game. I wouldn't characterise this as a flat West Coast performance. There was just a big gap between us and them, which we kind of already anticipated, which is probably why I'm going to err on the side of looking at what went well today. Like I said, it's a strange game where there were some positives, and I think you'd be ignorant to look at a performance like that where I'd say multiple West Coast young players had the best game of their careers as a game with no positives. So we're going to err on that side today. So who are the two players I'm referring to who had their best games for West Coast? I think Ryan Marrick, maybe not, he didn't smash, his previous best by any stretch. And I know that he had a couple of errors early, but I think over the course of the game, I think he stayed pretty active throughout. I think 29 would be the most possessions he had, kicked a goal as a result of a 50-metre penalty, well, actually a 100-metre penalty, which was a nice moment for him, I suppose, first goal of the season. But generally speaking, I thought that his ball use was pretty on point. I think his disposal efficiency was around 85. So I know there were a couple of mistakes, but when you look at what our captain did in that last quarter, kicking the ball to Christian Petrarca in a moment where I can only assume he thought that was a West Coast player. I can't imagine that was a miskick. I think he lined up Petrarca thinking he played for West Coast. That was weird. So Marrick was good. Campbell Chesser definitely played his best game at AFL level. I do think there is too much negativity on Chesser. I'm not necessarily going to say he's going to be a great AFL player, but I think he's an example of someone who made a bad first impression. And while he hasn't set the world alight, I certainly don't think he's the least talented player we've got at West Coast, that's for sure. But it was really nice to see him rack up the footy, I think, with the ball in hand and, his run and carry. I think that was evident today. There was that nice run through the middle of the ground where he burned a player off and then lace out past it to Archer Reid, who, of course, missed. And then later on, he did another good pass inside 50, a great inside 50 ball to Liam Ryan, who, of course, missed. So a really positive game from him. A couple of nice one-percenters as well, sort of running hard. Well, he took a mark with hard running. I think he was involved at the start of the chain and then also took the mark inside 50, kicked the goal. And then there was also some nice spoils he did throughout the game as well. So certainly, probably in our top 5 performers, I would say, if not top 3 for the day. I would also have Tom McCarthy in our bests. This guy's getting even better. I mean, I don't know how many centre bounces he attended or how much midfield time he got, but he won 2 centre clearances, and I certainly noticed one towards the end, which was a really good one, and he had 5 clearances throughout the game. So I think it's too early to see how much time he spent in the midfield. I'm guessing not the whole game, but he won 5 clearances, which is more than Hewitt. I didn't think Hewitt was bad. It's just another sort of half a game from Elijah Hewitt today. If I had to give you a top 5 of our best, I think Tom Cole was in that as well. I thought it was a pretty damn good game from him by his standards. I mean, he wasn't all Australian quality, but there were some really good moments, and I think it was a really good mark in there. I'm still burned by that shot on goal. Not to put the whole momentum swing on Tom Cole, but that felt so deflating. And I think Melbourne must have kicked like 8 in a row after that, if not more. I know he's not in the side for his goal kicking, but, I was on my feet at that time when I thought he was going to kick the goal, because it just felt like finally some nice reward for some nice build-up play for West Coast. And yeah, that was a deflating moment. Tim Kelly was also in our best, and that's back-to-back weeks where that's probably been the case. I think he had 27 disposals in the end and 7 clearances. It actually would have been 8, but the siren blew before the last one. For at least the last fortnight, Kelly is delivering on what we need desperately. He hasn't been outstanding, but certainly in our best 5 today. The other positive elements to this game were the totals. So, I mean, it's absolutely absurd that our 2 key forwards in this game have played like 12 and 6 games respectively. So it's Archer Reid and Job Shanahan. I thought Archer Reid had some nice moments. I'd say it was a step forward for him. A couple of strong marks. Same thing with Shanahan. Archer Reid, it was nice for him to kick a goal, and he missed another gettable one. And Shanahan kicked 2, if I'm not mistaken. So from how green this team is, those are some positive performances in my eyes. A couple of other young guys like Gross. I didn't really notice Gross a whole lot, but he got his hands on the footy like 15 to 17 times. I guess with him, it's like any exposure is good exposure at this point. And Hamish Davis, a couple of good passes, but other than that, not too much to comment on. So from that point of view, like I was pleased to see those things that I mentioned there. In general, like the game was frustrating. I don't think we started well. Probably deserved to be a bit further down. And then eventually we started to slowly get the game on our terms. And what was it, 21 points at halftime, 22 points at halftime? It felt like, I guess with West Coast, it always feels like the blowout is impending. Like it's always coming. And it certainly did in this game. But it didn't come as early as I expected it to. Like we hung on pretty well in that third term. I've seen all over social media and I agree with it. I am equally frustrated at how many times we went long down the line to Max Gawn. It seems like we did this last time we played him. Like Max Gawn went nuts last time when we lost to them at Optus. And there were moments in this game where we would then sometimes switch and played more controlled tempo footy and get the ball inside 50 really effectively. So that was pleasing. Like we actually did that a few times. It just took way too long to adapt to that. I'm not too sure why it took so long for us to learn that if you keep bombing it long to Max Gawn, he's going to take a mark. Look, I was as frustrated about that as anyone else. What's the root cause? Is it the player with the ball in his hands making the wrong decision every time? Is it a lack of players moving up the field? I don't feel like our movement across the field is strong, like particularly when I'm at West Coast games, and my dad always comments on it. There isn't a lot of movement in providing options anyway, so that is probably why we revert to that option so long. Anyway, strangely, Bailey Williams didn't get slaughtered in the hitouts. Like when you look at the raw statistic of hitouts, he didn't lose by that much. In fact, I think the hitouts were fairly even when I last looked at it, maybe halfway through the last quarter. I think it was 26 each, which is not to say he wasn't absolutely annihilated by his direct opponent. So yeah, this game definitely had me thinking about what it would be like to have Darcy Cameron next year, and I'm starting to edge my way to thinking maybe we do need to do it. Maybe we do need to get Darcy Cameron, and provided we can still hold our draft picks, but I've done a whole video on that. Certainly wouldn't blame goal accuracy as being a big factor in why the margin blew out so much, but it did feel like, once again, we left way too many on the table. I did already allude to Archer Reid missing a gettable one. Brockman hit the post when he probably shouldn't have. Ryan had another poster from a gettable shot. And then the one in the early stages of the game where he was in the goal square and kicked it behind. So that doesn't help. But at the end of the day, like if you look at over the course of the game, the amount of inside 50s we got, it wasn't great in this game. It felt like there was a lot of promising build-up play for West Coast throughout the day. So I would still just contrast that to some of the worst performances last year. And I think the excuses, if you want to call them that, it's an ugly word, but the excuse for the losses this year is still better than it was last year. I mean, look at how many kids we have in that team. Way too many teenagers coming up against a very seasoned and talented Melbourne Football Club who, well, I think should have finished higher this year. But if you just look at the quality of the players, Viney, Petrarca, I mean, Viney went nuts today in the clearances. I'm not surprised. But you compare that against Brady Hoff, who had a very quiet game again in the midfield. I'm not sure exactly what his role was. Was he tagging? Was he in the midfield? He just had the 11 possessions. Kelly spent a fair bit of time in there. Hewitt, he's going to be a slow burn, I think. Like, in between getting from where he is now as an impact player who impacts the game in bursts, or at least for a half, getting him to be a four-quarter player is going to take some time. So it's just so evident on paper why we're always going to lose this game massively. But overall, I wouldn't say it was the least enjoyable game to watch, which is maybe a sign of how bad things have gotten for us. But I think taking things into context and how weak this team was on paper. Not trying to dress it up too positively. I would just say that there were plenty of games this year that were far worse to watch than that one, even though the scoreboard blew out. It seems like we conceded a lot of goals very quickly. Heads dropped a little bit, then we came back, and we just couldn't run out the 4 quarters. And I think we're going to be very vulnerable for the last 3 weeks of this season. We have Adelaide next week. Fuck! Oh, that has potential to get really ugly. But in West Coast defense, they were more spirited than I predicted they would be today. So hopefully we avoid a 100-point loss at some point in the year. Who else we got after that? The Bulldogs at Marvel, and then the Sydney Swans. So a whole host of teams that are pretty good at giving us a touch-up, and they're all pretty good sides anyway. I don't believe there are any injuries from today's game. I mean, I thought Liam Ryan might have been, knocked the hell out. It turned out, well, presumably he passed the concussion test, right? It seemed like it was more the cut and the pain, I suppose, than an actual concussion that he was struggling with. That being said, it wouldn't be the first time a player has passed a concussion test and then showed symptoms the next week. So we'll see what happens with Liam Ryan, but both he and Trent Rivers played out the game. So Archer Reid also went down towards the end of the game there, clutching his ribs. So I'm hoping he was winded. It was hard to tell. But, again, a positive step again for Archer Reid. Still needs to work on his set shot kicking routine. That's going to take a whole preseason, if not more, for Archer. But other than that, I don't think we had any other casualties. And Jack Graham is due to return to the team next week. So it does help. Another mature body in there. I haven't really thought too much about who comes out. You'd imagine the last man in was Hamish Davis, so he might be the unlucky one, but I would be rushing Jack Graham back into this team for sure. But honestly, I'm sure a lot of you fans are the same. My mind is turning to how can we improve this list this offseason. As I said, I've done a video on it this week. That is where my mind is going at the moment because, we have kind of checked out from the season. I'm still going to obviously watch and review all the games, but for me, it's at the point of let's hope this doesn't get any worse than we're expecting. No 100-point losses, no major injuries. Let's just get to the end of the season and breathe a sigh of relief that it's all over. I believe this was actually the game that locked us into the wooden spoon, mathematically. I mean, we were always going to win the wooden spoon, obviously. But now there are only 3 games left for us anyway, and we are 4 wins behind Richmond, so we are officially wooden spooners for 2025. I'd kind of processed that several weeks ago, if not months. But anyway, guys, that is my quick reaction to our loss today. So let me know in the comments anything I've missed. I normally actually take more time to prepare these reviews, but I had a window to film, and this one felt like it was better to review when it was fresh in the mind. I am generally pleased with the way that some players played in this game. And whilst we got obliterated, I'm not at all surprised given how green we are. I mean, how many players in that team were playing either undrafted last year or played waffle for a lot last year. I mean, Brockman was in and out of the team last year. Clay Hall played mostly waffle last year. Hamish Davis wasn't drafted. Tom Gross wasn't drafted. Campbell Chesser was probably in and out of the team. Archer Reid played waffle. Jobe Shanahan wasn't drafted. Rhett Bazzo, I think, was injured for the entirety of last year, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, actually, no, he did play a late AFL game, but, basically the same thing. Tom McCarthy was playing Amos last year, if I'm not mistaken, and Ryan Marrick was a forward or a wingman in this West Coast side. So it's just so easy to see this team isn't prepared to win games of footy. They gave it a crack. I am pleased that they didn't, fold and were pathetic. I don't think that is a fair characterization of today. I just think there was just too much gap in ability between these two sides, and it was a bit of party time for Melbourne, who have some talented players. Also, I actually do want to mention this. How many free kicks did we give away for pushing the back? And I'm not even saying they weren't there, but they did seem to be more tightly adjudicated in this game, so we're a bit unlucky there. We must have conceded 3 or 4 goals from that. I'm not saying that they weren't necessarily there, but fuck, I'm frustrated by that. I'm frustrated by these shitty little 50-metre penalty free kicks we give away. I know we benefited from it, but in general, the game is worse when players are giving away 50s for moving. I think there was one that was against a Melbourne player, if I'm not mistaken. No, it was against us, where a player moved left to right when he was told to stand, and apparently that's worth 50 metres. Anyway, that's not really relevant to this game. Let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Do you agree with my positives? I'm kind of ignore the negatives. We knew we sucked. I didn't learn anything else from this game other than potentially Campbell Chesser has a future still at AFL level. Let me know what you think, guys. Up the Eagles.